Hello, personal productivity enthusiasts and community. Welcome to Anything But Idle, the Productivity News Podcast. Today's show is brought to you by W3C Web Services, and I'm Ray Sidney-Smith.
And I'm Augusto Pinaud.
And we're your hosts for Anything But Idle. Each week, we bring you... Oh, I'm sorry. This is episode 37, the goals episode. What are our and your goals? And we're going to talk about goal planning. And we're recording this on January 4th, 2021. Each week, we cover and discuss the productivity and technology news headlines of the week. And to do that, we bring on two panelists, usually. And we have two panelists today with us to talk about all things in personal productivity and technology. First and foremost, we have Dr. Frank Buck back with us. Most people are overwhelmed by the amount of paper and digital information in their lives. Frank Buck makes organization easy so you can increase productivity, decrease stress, and enjoy life. Global Gurus ranked Frank number 1 in the world in the time management category for 2019 and 2020. His career path took him from band director to principal to central office administrator and now to productivity coach and author. Welcome to Anything But Idle, Frank.
All right, it's great to be here. Happy 2021.
Ditto. Welcome to the show. And our rounding out our panel, we have Derek Reinhardt. Productivity and practice seems to be where everyone looks this time of year. Books are great, tools are great. Resolving to actually do what is important is where we fall down so often. Derek has been working personal and organizational productivity practices since the 80s. He spent 20 years in the United States Air Force as a pilot and an operations planner. He is certified in knowledge management, and he has his PMP, which is the Professional Project Management Professional Certification. He recently retired from the Federal Service. He's written 2 brief how-to books on using GTD, the Getting Things Done methodology, with Bullet Journal and with Goalscape. And so with that, welcome to Anything But Idle, Derek.
All right. Hi.
This is your first time on.
Yeah, it is.
Newbie.
Yeah, for a podcast in general. So
fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Welcome.
So with that, what we're going to do today is we like to open up the show usually with a theme. And so for those of you who are watching, we're going to be talking about goal setting before we get into the news today. And what I wanted to kind of cover with you all is in a year like last year, coming into a year like this year, where we're in the midst of a pandemic, a global pandemic, people are in varying stages of working from home and working virtually, as well as going out there and working in hybrid environments now. What are the kinds of goals you think people should be setting, or maybe how should people be approaching goal setting in the context of the kind of life circumstances, and what are some of the goal planning practices that you know of or would share with others out there in the world? And I'll start while you think, which is that for many, many years, I've actually talked about the idea of goal planning off the calendar year, which is to say that if you were born in December or January, I'm sorry, I can't help you. But for the rest of us, you were likely born in a month that was not January or December necessarily, and so for the rest of us, for the other 10 months of the year, you can actually start your year in your birth month, and I actually think it's quite useful to start in your birth month for a number of really good reasons. One is that's when you started on the planet, so that's where you should probably begin planning in terms of a personal calendar year. 2, if it's not in January or December, then it usually actually reduces stress, because around those times of the year, culture dictates that you do all of these things that take up time, and there's this pressure on you to prepare and plan and reflect all in this concentrated period of time. And I just generally don't like to feel that pressure. So my birthday happens to be in November, so I spend the month of October actually doing reflection and planning for November 1st, which ends up being my new year, my personal calendar year, new year. And that really offsets the rest of the year for me in terms of, right now, I'm already in the 3rd month of my first quarter of the year. So for everybody else, they're kind of behind me in a way, right? Because I'm working toward next year's goals already, and I'm in that process. And so that's just one of the little tips that I like to give to people is, like, if your birthday's not even if it is in January, December, start your year where you started on the planet. And I think that really just helps, reduce some of the stress.
When I coach clients, I always tell clients that we humans are awful at calculating what we can accomplish on a year, and are even worse on estimate what we can accomplish in three. So when I ask people, hey, what you're going to do in the next year? Oh, they come with this long list. But when you ask them what you're going to accomplish then in three, they add two or three things to that long list of that they're going to accomplish in the next 12 months. So one of the things I do with them is work into exactly this, into calculate what we want to accomplish in 3 years, what we want to accomplish in a year. And from there, we split it up for 13 weeks. So that way, the 13 weeks, it's much easier to recalibrate, much easier to calculate, and much easier to work into those goals.
Mhm. Yeah, for my end, I spent so many years in education. My year was always starting in August. It was the June and July where you were setting up everything that was going to make the school year successful. So that was sort of the one downtime that you had. It was the time where hardly anybody else was in the building. Soon after school was out, you could get lots of things done. You could spend a half day, you could spend an entire day on a project, which you can't do that during the school year. Your day is so fragmented. So, mine was always the academic year. And, Augusto, I guess I would kind of be one of those that when you ask me my 3 year goals, I'd be kind of hazy because I tend to not plan so far out because there's so many variables. Um, as I look back over the things that have really made a difference in my life and the things that I'm really proud of, 3 years before those things happened, I would not have predicted those things were going to happen. Some of them weren't even on the radar. So, I try to be flexible and be able to take advantage of the opportunities as they present themselves.
No, and it's not about losing the flexibility in any way, shape, or form, but it's about making sure if there's big, big goals that you want to accomplish that you can work in them. It's not necessarily to have a really long list, but or longer. It's not need to have at least three times what you want to accomplish in a year, but want to envision what kind of person. And I tend to talk about 11 categories: health, learn and grow, your emotional life, your spiritual life, your character, your love with your significant other, your parenting, if you have kids, social life, relationships, your career, your financials, and the quality of your life. And it is important to look where do I doesn't mean you're going to be there, but if you don't aim to somewhere, any place will do. So sometimes aim to, okay, you know what, in the next 3 years I will love to be able to do X, and having that goal in mind help you to navigate that the time between now and then.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I think one of the things, and maybe it's just I'm a little more right-brained or something, is the zoom out and looking at, what is your mission? Working through that. That's one thing that I think that David Allen has kind of given a nod to Stephen Covey as far as, you work through that and get your mission, and then what does it look like in those roles, like you were saying, Augusto, and then what would be those goals to those roles which match up with your vision. I think there was this picture of a ship with three uh, spotlights, lighthouses, to get into this treacherous bay, and you have to line all those up in order to get to where you want to go safely as well. So, the goals can be there. They're backed up by those roles, those accountability roles, as David Allen discusses. Then you have that mission, which is that burning yes that Stephen Covey talks about. So you line up all of those. And then step through what is each one of those measurable activities that you do that's going to move you in that direction and fulfill your mission.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a tip, I guess, for folks, which is that there's a psychological construct based on research that is when you try to set goals, try to use the smallest increment for reaching that goal. So what I mean is, if I say I'm going to lose 10 pounds in a year, that's not particularly useful versus saying I'm going to lose 1 pound a month. Or say I'm going to lose half a pound every 2 weeks by basically saying in 26 weeks, I'm going to lose this amount of weight each week. You're much more likely to reach the goal because you've broken it down. Just like any larger project, when you break it down into its elemental parts, you're more likely to be able to understand its achievability based on those smaller pieces. But there's also that psychological trick when you think, okay, well, I'm going to do this in a year. Well, what does that mean to write a book in a year? But when you say I'm going to write 2,000 words a week, now at the end of the year you have enough material to actually turn into a book. So just remember that you've got to work backwards in that sense and then break things down. So there's some retrospective or reverse planning that's required, inclusive with breaking down the goals to the smaller kind of sub goals, but the smaller projects on your way toward the larger goal. So
yeah, the losing weight, that's the time of year everybody's doing that resolution sort of
it's
thing.
the opposite for me. I'm trying to gain weight.
But yeah, the losing weight is a lag indicator where we were just before I retired from federal service, we're talking a lot about lead and lag indicators in our shop, but those lead indicators are, what of those things can we measure now that are showing that we're going to meet that lag indicator? So as far as weight goes, it's X amount of calories, it's X amount of exercising or something like that. Those are lead indicators to the lag indicator of actually changing your body shape, your weight, and that sort of thing. So yeah, two sides of the same coin there, but good points.
Frank?
Yeah, Ray, if you're trying to gain some weight, I've got some pounds that I will give you, and I remember the days when I was also trying to gain weight. So don't worry, it's gonna happen for you there.
I don't think my genetic code is disposed to that idea, but I will be happy to have a little bit more muscle, not necessarily
If
muscle.
you find
and
a
fat,
way
I mean
to
both.
accept donations, let me know. I'm first in line, second in line.
Yeah.
First in line.
Back on actual topic, Derek. For 1 second, Augusto. So Derek, can you explain for viewers and listeners the concept of lead and lag indicators? Because I think this is really useful for people to really understand when they're goal setting, which is to understand what those two components are. Can you just briefly describe that for folks so they have an idea about when they're setting goals, which indicators, which measurements to look for?
Oh, wow. Catch me on the spot on that. But it's almost like measuring cause, measuring effect sort of thing is that, I mean, and taking, the weight and the health piece as well, is that you've got this actual mission or accountability of being healthier. And for, I'd say, most of us, you're accepted there as far as wanting to have lower heart rate, wanting to have a lower BMI, body mass index, that sort of thing. So then you go back and say, okay, in order to feel healthier, more energetic, and that sort of thing, I need to lose weight. That's a lag indicator. The lead indicator is, like I was saying, caloric intake, amount of aerobic exercise. So it's almost like the lead indicators are the how. You can measure these how steps, which then will result in the goals, those lag indicator goals that you're looking for. And I'm at a lot other than, and I've got what we joked in our house, the COVID-19 is that I've got the 19 pounds from COVID time. So,
yeah, so we can think of a lead indicator as predictive, whereas a lag indicator is retrospective, and so just like when you're planning out a goal, just remember that you have those two different measurement capabilities, and as you noted, lead indicators are going to be more useful to you in so many ways
because those are the ones that you're controlling, and that if you're meeting those as a direct consequence, as long as you're saying I've got the I've identified the appropriate lead indicators that will result in this lag indicator, this goal. Yeah.
And that's a huge conversation in the educational arena. We give the high stakes test every spring. And by the time, you get the results back, well, those kids have already graduated. Some of the teachers have retired. And so here's the results on how well you taught last year. We call it the autopsy, and there's nothing you can do about it at that point. The numbers are what the numbers are. And so coming up with, as Derek was talking about, the lead indicators, what can we measure on a more frequent time frame so that we can adjust as we go? And what are the things that we know we should be doing so that the results will be good? Are we doing those things? And we can measure yes or no whether we're doing those things, just like we can measure how much we're eating, how much we're exercising.
Right.
And that's one thing that when I work with coaching, and I coach clients into these goals and this, I said there is two parts of this. There is the vision on these 11 things I mentioned, and there is a strategy for these things that you are now putting in. So if you're saying for your health, hey, I want to lose the 25 pounds, that's your vision for that goal. But now let's turn the page, and I actually do the exercise for the client as turn the page. And then on the other side of the page, let's write now the strategy. How are we going to make those 2 pounds every other week, or how we're going to make what kind of changes can you actually measure that are going to take you to that vision? Because the problem I see, and I see for many years, is people create these visions, and the visions are pretty, but then there is a complete disconnection between one and the other. So what you have is the next December, we are going to do an autopsy, as Dr. Frank was saying, well, okay, we did not lose the 19 pounds. We gained 5. Well, okay, let's now aim for 25 for next year. But when you can now look and tweak the goals in general don't change, but there is one thing that is really important. Derek was mentioned getting things done. And the first time I read about the reticular system was the first time I read Getting Things Done by David Allen. And there is something interesting about that, about saying, hey, I want to lose that 120 pounds. That never give it to me. But when I changed that goal for I want to eat healthier, okay, and I want to learn to eat healthier, that changed for me. And I told the story. Then what is now 2021? So this will be 11 years ago. I was 400 pounds. Okay, that was the peak of the heat of what I got, and now I tend to joke that I'm half the man I used to be. Okay, but it was not because of the pounds. Before that, I did 12 pounds. What is up? He said, I got to fine. Let's do 20 pounds for next year, and instead keep it growing, because that's one thing that is really important on that goal. If you cannot envision yourself there, you are never going to make it. And for most people, envision pounds, it's really, 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 really hard.
Yeah, so the folks who are not aware, the reticular activating system and what Augusto's talking about in terms of reticular formation is that very, very simply is that brain mechanism whereby which if you see a red car, then all of a sudden you start seeing more and more red cars. It is that concept of habituation of our stimuli. So it covers all things: behavioral arousal, consciousness, all kinds of things are a part of that system. And so anyway, the whole concept of goal planning is so fascinating to me, and I appreciate everybody's thoughts here. And so with that, let's now close out this segment and move into our stories of the week, at least part A of our stories of the week. And so with that, Augusto, by the way, for those of you who are watching and listening, I did pick up 2 articles that I thought were pretty interesting about goal planning and whatnot. I'll throw those into the show notes, so you'll have those when you listen to this later. But with that, Augusto, let's get into stories of the week. And what is our first headline this week? You're still muted. First time of the year.
First time of the year need to happen. I promise it's not going to be the last one. So the first one is Google brings tab search for Chromebooks with Chrome 87, and it's an old news. This happening beginning of December. We just happened to not had the chance to bring it to the news, but finally with Chrome 87, you can start searching into those tabs that make really powerful, the Chromebooks that are using Chrome 87. The ability to not only that you can have a bazillion of those tabs, but now that you can actually open them, it is a really, really powerful thing.
Yeah, so for those of you who might be confused, if you're in your Google Chrome on a normal desktop browser, now in the latest version of Chrome, sorry, I'm one of the Google Chrome product experts, so I can't help myself but jump in here. But the idea here is that when you're in normal Google Chrome, you will now start to see, if you're in the latest version, which you should update to the latest version, if you type the name of any tab that is currently open, you will see a drop-down list from that Omnibox, and in there you will see switch to tab, a little chip that will show up that'll say switch to tab. That means you have an open tab with that content in it, and you can go ahead and click on that, and it will take you there as opposed to opening up a new tab and taking up more resources. What Augusto just noted that is happening in Chrome 87 once it comes out is that you'll now be able to click a little, it's already out actually because of the delay in news, but you'll be able to click in Chrome OS. That means if you're on a Chromebook, you can click a little down arrow in the top right-hand corner of your browser, and you'll see a drop-down list and then be able to search your open tabs, basically all of your open applications, which is just a really, really useful and helpful new tool. So with that, let's move our way along, Augusto, to our next news this week.
And we continue in the Google world. And the next one, it's a great article from Chrome Unboxes that even if you are not on a Chromebook, it applies to most of them. And it's how to block out the distractions to boost productivity in 2021. And one of the things that is interesting with technology is how much the badging and the notifications, and we are self-inflicting all these distractions in ourselves, as if we don't have enough distractions. Okay, we also have the badge and the notification and the corner thing coming and the other corner for the other application. So the article comes with a couple of tips on how to deal with this, how to specifically in Chrome limit the volume and limit the notifications. Also talk about a Pomodoro application that you can put on your
Which
Chromebook.
is amazing. So if you guys don't know about this, it's the Pomodoro PWA, which is a progressive web application. And you can actually use this with Google Chrome, so it's not limited to
Anywhere.
Chrome OS. So you could just go ahead and get Pomodoro PWA, go to the article, click on the link, and it, in essence, creates a little tiny mini app that then you can just like drag around on your screen. And it's super, super helpful. Awesome. And so, yeah, the Chrome Unboxed article is just full of these little tips that is well worth checking out.
Yeah. And the other thing they talk is about Organizer Launcher and working with virtual desks, task tab groups, and everything else. And, the more we spend time in the browser, being Chrome, being Edge, being Safari, really it's the more important is to learn and understand how to get the most out of it, how to reduce the distractions. Doesn't matter what you do. The reality is we spend way more time. I remember when I wrote 25 tips for productivity, one of the tips in there was to use two browsers, one for work, one for to play. And part of the reason was the distractions. And it is interesting to see 8 years later that distraction, we are not even close to get better. We have been getting worse and worse and worse. So it is important to learn how to manage and work with those distractions. The next one, it's a news that you should introduce, Ray, since this is your dream setup, I think.
All right, so this is an article, I believe from was it from from Make Use Of. I thought it was going to be a good e-reader article, but either way, it's called the Paperlike 253. This is a 25-inch high-resolution grayscale monitor, but it is a little bit more powerful than that because it's e-ink, which means that it is drawing limited power and is this amazing high refresh rate grayscale e-ink display. I mean, like, that is just amazing in terms of technology, to think that we've come this far in terms of e-ink technology. And so those of you who are using Kindle, the Paperwhite line, or if you're using any other e-reader that allows you to be able to write on the surface with e-ink, you just have to understand that the technology has a very slow refresh rate. It just takes a lot of time for that technology to crystallize those pieces, whatever the chemical thing that's going on. And so that for them to be able to create a monitor that is palatable. I mean, it's not going to play a movie. I mean, you're gonna see slow down in terms of its movement, but to be able to do everyday tasking, to have a grayscale monitor to reduce eye strain. There's all kinds of really good reasons to that. Not any of the bunk related to blue light or anything else like that. Blue light doesn't damage your eyes. It's not dangerous. But what I'm really talking about is eye strain, and being able to direct light directly onto an e-ink display. Just brilliant. I'm very excited. I'm not going to likely buy it, but a boy can dream.
but I'm going to say with this, and no, it's not about blue light, but as a person, for the listeners who work on the iPads or the Mac OS, I don't know if it's possible, not possible, or how to do it in any other platform. But in the iPad, you can access to the accessibility, and then you can activate the filters and put the gray colors. It is not e-ink, it is gray colors. But if you are tired, or you're going to work a lot of hours, in a lot of focus, in the Mac as well in the iPad, it is a godsend to turn that thing into gray scale, and then don't get your eyes tired. We all spend a ridiculous amount of hours in front of our screens. And I have now come that after a certain time, I put them, as soon as I start feeling tired, put them in grayscale. And unless I need something that I want actual colors, and I can just turn off the filter, it works great. But then I can stay way longer looking at my screen without feeling that heaviness.
Yeah, I've never really thought about the grayscale versus the color. That consciously turning it. I was a kid who grew up with black and white TV, so of course I'm familiar with grayscale from way on back, but haven't thought consciously about going back and sort of revisiting that. But
a really good tip for folks is that if you're ever in a situation where your battery is low on your phone, switch over to grayscale, which will take less power and therefore give a little bit of longevity to your phone until you get to power again.
Yeah. Related to that, the Kindle has sepia settings, which is similar to grayscale. It's set off, but for low light options, as well as a little easier on your eyes. My wife uses it quite a lot reading at night, but it's, again, as Augusto was saying, is something that'll ease up the stress on your eyes.
Yeah, it does. It has nothing to on the argument of blue light or not blue light. It has nothing to do with that. But because it's the grayscale, there's a lot less brightness. So your eyes get, and I can work for way more hours. That make it really good for me.
Yeah, and I can actually think about this in the context of being a writing display for a device. Folks who have been watching for a while know that I've been playing around with a Raspberry Pi 400, and that's just a keyboard, shell for the Raspberry Pi. And to be able to connect something like this e-ink display, that would be the perfect low distraction type of device where I feel it's limited. It's not, but I feel its limitation. There's like a weird feeling that it's limited. And so I will use that just for certain purposes. It's kind of why I like single function devices. I like my Kindle because all I want to do on it is read. I don't want to hack it to be able to browse the web or to do other things. I just want to read on it. And I don't want anyone to distract me from that focus. And so that device gives me that capability. Could I read it on my iPad? Sure. Could I read it on any number of the convergence devices that I have around me? I have Chromebooks galore and laptops galore and all kinds of devices. Of course. But that's not the point. The point is to actually read. And to read means I need to get rid of all of the other functions so I can just focus on that. And so I see something like the e-ink display market really helping those people who need that kind of focus. I can even see like putting blinders on the side of the monitor so you can only see the screen and not see other things. Oh man, my brain is all kinds of a Twitter about this idea of an e-ink display. But with that, let's move on to a little bit more e-reader and e-ink display news.
Well, and the next news comes from Amazon. Amazon is ending today if you are listening live. Yesterday, if you are listening to our audio, our Kindle Lending library will close on January 4th, 2021. And it's interesting because this was a feature that was kind of on the dark side. They never really make a lot of noise about it, and it's living exactly the same way. Amazon is not making any acknowledgement or making anything. But it was interesting. It was launched in 2016, so it was for a long time that you can lend in your things, and it was really, really good. So.
No, it was launched 10 years ago. So it was launched in 2011.
2011
Yeah.
and then
So
2016
was
for
Prime
Prime
Reader.
members. Right?
Yes. So the folks who know, just as a retrospective, in 2011, anyone who owned a Kindle device, a physical Kindle device, could use the Kindle Owner Lending Library, and I have used it this entire time up until yesterday. So they're going to sunset it and cut me off. And so the whole idea was that you could rent a book from those available within the Kindle Owner Lending Library, or COLL, and they made it very difficult over the last few years to like find the books in the system. They did all kinds of tricks to make less people use it, and that was because they were bringing Kindle Prime Reading on live, and in essence that replaces it. So it's nostalgic that they're getting rid of it, but otherwise the reality is it doesn't really change anything.
And that's separate, because I saw that article, and that's separate from the Kindle Unlimited.
Correct. That's a payment.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I wasn't even aware of this other program. It's like, oh, it's going belly up. Well, I never knew it existed. So
yeah, it's not even, because they're just shutting down this program because they have a program that replaces it. So it's really like, while it's a different program in my mind, I don't really see it as they're just swapping the programs. They had a program that's working with Kindle Prime Reading. You can go ahead and do basically the same thing. So don't fret. And so with that, let's move along to our last piece of news before we hit our break.
Well, we're still going to stay on to Amazon, and we are going to talk about Wondery, the podcast startup that Amazon just acquired. And we have been talking in past shows how the war for the podcast is getting heated, and this is just another example. It is fantastic what the podcast for the US has been, but it's really interesting how in 2020 podcast companies begin to try to expand podcasts to really the whole world, and especially third world markets and all this, and the efforts they're doing. And the war, it's on, and Wondery is now part of Amazon, and let's see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, this clearly shows the consolidation of these very well-funded startups. Wondery, while they keep saying it was a small startup, I mean, they had a lot of funding, and they were doing very high production shows, and so this ends up being another kind of stab at the reality that eventually the podcast market will need to contract across those big budget shows. That's not going to ultimately change podcasting. The way you listen to us, in the podcast app is really not going to ultimately change. And as long as there's an RSS feed, with the ability to add a media enclosure, podcasting really is not going to change for us. What I do think is really good is that it brings more people to the pie. It really helps to add more people to the understanding that podcasting exists, and there's a legitimacy to that, and that's really great. And so with that brings us to our halfway point in the show, and we will be back with you after the ad break with more stories this week.
Did you know half of small businesses don't have websites, and half don't make it past 1 year in business? Are these stats correlated? We're not sure, but we think you should have a website. W3C Web Services provides affordable managed WordPress website hosting along with VPS, domain name registration, and other small business-focused services. For listeners of this podcast, you can book a free 30-minute digital marketing strategy session when you purchase a new hosting plan, $150 value. Once you purchase your new hosting plan, forward the receipt to support@w3cinc.com with the podcast title in the subject line of the email message, and we'll get you scheduled for your digital marketing strategy session. Head over to anythingbutidle.com/webhosting and get started with your small business website today. And now, back to your show.
Welcome back, everybody, to Anything But Idle. We were discussing the first half of the stories of the week and before the break, and now we are going to go into our second half of the stories of the week. And so with that, Augusto, we've got Samsung with a big announcement.
Yes, they officially confirmed that the Galaxy S21 is going to have an event on January 14. So we will try to plan to have an event discussing the event if it's relevant and long enough and show what they are going to do. We know they are going to officially kill the S20. They're bringing the S21, S21 Plus, and S21 Ultra, as we have heard. And the event will be 7 a.m., and it's called Welcome to the Everyday Epic. So let's see what happened with that event. And it's going to be on January 14, and we will try to make the comments on the event later.
Yeah, we try to do a commentary show based on these large tech live events, usually the day after or so. So we'll try and get something on the schedule and bring the news to you there.
So the 14th, 7 a.m.
That's 7 a.m. PST.
7 a.m. PST, yes.
Yeah. So it's 10 a.m. 10 a.m. Eastern, which would be 8 o'clock Central for you. I'm sorry, 6 o'clock. I'm sorry, 9 o'clock Central for you. My math is all.
And now we know Dr. Buck is completely confused about when the event is going to be.
That is my fault. That's my fault.
Whenever it comes on, it's on, So.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. Moving right along with the news. There was an article. Who published this? Analytics Insight. Yeah. They talked about hybrid work models and. Tell us a little bit about that, Augusto.
At the beginning of the pandemic, we talked about what was going to happen with all this. And what they're saying now is, okay, well, what is going to happen? And the reality is the remote work is here to stay. And for a lot of companies was a lifesaver. So now we're starting to talk about the hybrid work model where we let people work when they work, and we create teams in which some people stay in the office while the other one is outside, and then they flip around, and you keep making the organizations better, but also allow it to have those to shift the workloads between the different people, the different directions, the remote, the people in the office. So it's going to hopefully bring a lot more flexibility, but also is going to allow companies to retain more people. We discussed at the beginning of the pandemic how one of the big issues was there was people who, like me, who wanted to work remotely forever, and we make it happen. There was people who always dream about it, but the work was not necessarily allowing them to do. And now they have 8-9 months working remotely, and those things are going to be an issue for these companies to say, everybody in. No, I don't want to go in. I have proved myself that I can work at home and be a reasonable, responsible human. So, and for the other side of that coin is there are companies who discover we don't want people coming in ever again. We are happily looking at each other in a Zoom meeting. So all those elements, all those factors are going to be really, really interesting coming to the mid of 2021 as we start having the talks of, okay, we may be ready to go back. I don't see coming back before then, but that's me. And
I'm going to disagree with you in part, only because I think that what we're going to see is more and more businesses forced into bringing their employees back on site for some limited capacity because it doesn't make any sense for some of these companies to continue to stay closed and having them work remotely. There's just going to be a forcing function based on economic reasons. So there's that part of it. Plus, as people get vaccinated, they're gonna presume that those folks can come back into their offices, rightly or wrongly. I don't particularly know the science there. I think it's probably a poor choice to continue to continue to think that you can just push people back into the office just because they have been vaccinated, especially since so few people are currently vaccinated. Even as we get into larger numbers, there's still not going to be a threshold, a number of those. That being the case, I think that a lot of companies are going to choose, as this article kind of rightly states, that they're going to choose this hybrid model. And what ultimately is going to happen is that there's going to be a power kind of grab. Those organizations where you have very dominant managers who want to have control over their staff, they're going to try and pull those people back into the office. Those that are a little bit more laissez-faire and understand performance and results-based management, they're going to be able to let go of the clutches on the physical office spaces, and you'll see those companies, I think, prosper. I think those companies are the ones that will actually do better in the long term. I think for all of us who are in companies and working in environments where we have to pay attention to how to be productive, this is where knowing how to be productive from a mobile perspective is going to be really important right now, because you're going to have to be potentially on the move, moving back and forth between in-person work at your office space, which they may decide to go to hoteling, they may decide to do other kinds of modalities for you, and then you having to come back to home and work, especially as we go through these rolling sets of lockdowns. The UK right now is going through a severe lockdown because of this COVID-19, more contagious variant. We have that in the United States now. It's here. We don't know where, but it's here, and it's going to spread. And that means you're going to have more and more people forced into going back home when they just got back to the office and they were like, great, I can sit down at my I got to go back home and work now. So you're going to have this yo-yo effect. And I think the best thing you can do is just learn how to be mobile. And if you can learn how to work in kind of not mobile, but learn how to be flexible and adaptive in that kind of moving environment, and I think you're going to be so much better off.
Yeah, it's interesting with 2020 and that the whole transition point to becoming primarily remote workers for those who had that latitude. I think with the COVID variant, as well as the inoculations getting introduced, that I would think that the disruption of 2020 is actually going to be magnified to a degree for those office workers, knowledge workers, people who are working in 2021, just because of that much, like what you're saying, Ray, the power grabs, but as well as the British have been experiencing this. Oh well, it's not working out. We gotta pull back again, and I could just see that continuing at least for the first half of 2021 in North America.
And I think pretty soon we've really got to start looking at I guess you call it the professional development. When I go into the office, I do my work, but I also get better. And a lot of that getting better is the interaction with other people. It's not in writing the report or doing the various tasks, but it's what happens between all those other tasks. And I think for a limited amount of time, we can go home and we can do those tasks just as well at home as we can do at the office. But unless there is some real effort, the professional development side of it just kind of goes to pot. We're learning from ourselves. We're getting better at being us, and there's nothing to kind of ramp us up.
Yeah, and I think you look at this. If we look into the school, and I know you, as a past principal, know a lot about it, but the people who have little kids at home are seeing this, but I've also seen, I mentioned in this show, I see a two side of this. I see my little kid, thriving much better than what he was in school, mostly because he is not getting in trouble as much with the teacher. Okay. It's not. It's. I wish to tell you it's because he's learning better, but the reality is no. He's just not in trouble every 5 minutes because the teacher can. And with my oldest, instead, she's hurting on that social side. So same thing we are going to see on the adults and professionals on where are we into that, and where the people who need that more social contact need to adapt, need to be flexible. I agree with Ray that a lot of the work we have as I have as a coach for the next 6, 7, 8 months is to help my clients into see what they need to really be flexible, to be 1 day in the office, 2 days at home, back to the office, and back remote.
Definitely. All right. Next up, we are going to talk about Microsoft. And unfortunately, Microsoft has acknowledged that their systems have been hacked. And it sounds to me like, from the reporting that I've been hearing, is that they were able to not hack into accounts of people, but into their own internal accounts, and were capable of seeing some of the code that runs some of these systems. And so this is obviously a developing circumstance, but this is really, unfortunately, based on the SolarWinds hack and all of the things that happened in the U.S. government-based hacking, we're now seeing that Microsoft is impacted. And this has a real, life implication on us all in terms of thinking about how, how Excel is secured, how Microsoft Office is secured, just generally, because if they can see the source code, then they can do all kinds of manipulation of it, which is potentially dangerous to us all. So I don't know if there's anything that we need to do. I don't think we can do anything. This is all in Microsoft's camp to do the forensics and to be able to help us understand what we need to do in order to be prepared for it. But we will be following the story and letting you know what we learn as we learn it. Next up, Augusto.
Next, we are going to talk to an article that came on the Goodman Project. They prioritize your task and master productivity using the Eisenhower matrix. The Eisenhower matrix is the important, urgent matrix, and it was a good article. And for one of the things that for a lot of people happened in 2020 is personal productivity has come to be relevant for the first time to many people, but they're not ready yet to maybe jump into the grounds of getting things done or the grounds even of the late Stephen Covey. And they're looking for something. Can I get something that allows me to move forward, but much, much simpler that I can see? And the Eisenhower matrix is exactly that tool. It's a tool that you can really cannot go wrong. You only have 4 squares, so it cannot make it more simple like that. But it is important to understand what it is and why it can help you, especially if you are discovering that maybe you need something about productivity and you make the mistake of go to Google and says, how can I be more productive? And now are completely overwhelmed with the answer of millions of answers.
Yes, and I imagine the folks who are watching and listening are not those people. They are the people you are interacting with and you are frustrated with right now. They are the people who need to hear this. But for those of you who are you constantly hear the term Eisenhower matrix, and I did want to clarify for folks that you should be actually searching for the Merrill-Covey matrix, which is the matrix designed by Rebecca and Roger Merrill, along with Dr. Stephen Covey, and their research, which went into the book First Things First. And so that system and that design process, while Eisenhower sounds cute and is where President Eisenhower was purported to have developed this notion. Really, the research and the methodology itself, you'll get more information if you search for Merrill-Covey matrix out there. All right, what else do we have? We have a few more articles. All right, a little bit of news about the iPhone and Apple Watch.
So there is, again, this is the episode of the goals, and I am the Apple guy, so I found this article in 9 to 5 about what you can do with your watch and your iPhone to make this year more productive, but to stick with the resolutions. As I was saying before, the vision is not enough. the vision, need the strategy, so you can make. And this article talk about a lot of different things you can do to help you with that strategy. It helps you about accountability, about stakes, about different softwares that you can use. Talk about a software that I love that's called Streaks, that you can define how often and what it is and put your icons. Is a really cool thing. Talks about the circles, talk about how habit minders, so you can change habits, and talks about, it's a really well written article, talks in details about how to use your phone and your watch to really help you on the strategy for those, to accomplish those goals.
Fantastic. Sorry, I'm not the Apple guy. I got nothing. More Apple news though. What's next up in Apple's news?
The next is Apple lose the copyright battle against security startup Corellium. And this is interesting because this is the first battle that I see Apple losing on this backgrounds. Okay, Corellium designed a way to help people break the iPhone, and in theory, can only be used to use inside of their platform, but allows them to try to hack in the system. There has been a lot of movements, the Hackintosh, people trying to install Mac OS into different hardwares, and Apple has always win those battles. For some reason, the battle with Corellium was lost. The judge in Florida considered that, nope, it's fine what they're doing. It is for the better good, and so they are going to let Corellium continue doing that and continue making Corellium helps find those bugs into the iOS operating system. But again, it was interesting because this is the first time that I see Apple lose on one of those. And I'm sure they will appeal and this battle is not over, but still, it was a good hit, and something that is interesting to see for the other companies, for the Microsoft and the Googles, what this is going to mean for them. Because even that as a star on Apple, we know now that sets precedents for the others too.
Yeah, I think this will be a limited case. I think the merits of the case were valid. I think the loss was correct judgment, but I don't see this being particularly expansive in terms of interpretation. So we'll see what happens. I mean, again, Google and Amazon and the rest of them, Facebook was what I was thinking of, Google and Facebook, and Amazon to some extent, but mostly Google and Facebook in 2021 and beyond they're really going to have to tread lightly in terms of how they interact and engage with the general public, and certainly how they deal with litigation going forward in understanding the fact that they've got these antitrust cases out there against them, and they're coming into probably a politically unfriendly environment with regard to the new administration and what's really going to happen. Basically tomorrow, and whatever happens in Georgia will determine the course of the next 4 years. And so that'll be very interesting to see once the Georgia Senate runoff is called in a couple of weeks and whatnot. Then we will see whether or not the balance of power shifts in that way, and that will really determine Google and Facebook's fate in terms of how they'll really be able to do a lot of what they've been planning and trying to do. I did hear a little bit of reporting this past week about Apple potentially having some thoughts about going into the car space and maybe even just using their technology in cars versus building their own, that kind of thing. But Google has made kind of a movement away from that with their Waymo system. They invested in so on and so forth, but they've pushed themselves further away from the electric and self-driving car platform. I think in part, all of these pieces kind of connect to each other. And so the more Google gets decoupled from themselves, the less likely they are to be able to control their forward movement. Apple has remarkably been able to keep themselves intact and moving forward, and while still commanding huge amounts of cash value. So I'm very curious how this will work out in the long run, but something really interesting to pay attention to. Anything else, Augusto?
We have the last news on, and I remember in January 2007, the Apple iPhone was announced, and I remember people saying, "This thing will never work because it do not have Adobe Flash Player. Who will want a device without Adobe?" Well, I'm come here to report that officially Adobe Flash is out. It's dead on December 31st. And if you want an article how to remove it from your Mac, I'm happy to share you the link. And I, for one, I'm really celebrating this because it was a piece of software that gave me more headaches than benefits.
Yeah, so for folks who are unaware, Adobe Flash does there are remnants of it that is retained on the system and is quite honestly a security hole. I mean, it's a big security risk to have that running on your system. And as much as Adobe will tell you, oh, we've patched it. I mean, Flash is as holy as a block of Swiss cheese. So you really need to just get rid of it. And when I came across the instructions, I thought, you know what, everybody watching and listening should really just go through and follow the process for removing Flash from your system. Just get rid of it across the board. Most of the major browsers, all of the major browsers have now both deprecated and removed it from their systems, so you shouldn't have any of those remnants in your browsers. But there are others that have been caked into the system in other ways, and so you can go ahead and purge yourself of that godforsaken product. It's one of the few things that I've longed for its death. So.
Yes, it is not going to be missed. But with this, let's go to the new tool of the week.
Fantastic. Okay, so I'm having a little bit of technical difficulties. I'm not going to be able to bring it up on screen, but let's absolutely get into the new tools of the week. And so each week, Augusto and I cull the interwebs for all kinds of things, and we come across many personal productivity tools and services in that research. And so in this segment, New Tools of the Week, we like to bring you new tools that we think you might enjoy. And so this week, Augusto and myself and our two panelists all have different things to share with you. And so first up is a tool called Substack. And so my choice is a tool called Substack. And Substack is basically an alternative to Trello. And I came across this through VentureBeat.com. And in essence, you're capable of utilizing Substack to be able to create a Kanban or really, it's a Kanban style board environment. And it's just really quite slick. You have the ability to put up a Merrill-Covey matrix style grid and do that kind of prioritization of particular projects. And you can place them in those grids. It's just really, really slick. And I thought it was really interesting. I've played just a little bit with it, and you can create dependencies automatically in the system. I wonder if I could bring this up on screen because I have this here on this system. Let's see here. Let's see if I can do it.
Do you want me to try to bring it in my screen?
There we go. Okay, so I can't put it into full screen mode. Otherwise, it locks up my system for some reason. But either way, here you can see you can create this like matrix and utilize dependencies. It allows you to be able to do a SWOT analysis. If those of you who don't know it, a SWOT analysis: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We do this in business quite often. And so you can do a SWOT analysis inside the system. So it's got all of this this opinionated component structure that's really quite useful, and it allows you to be able to manage in this remote environment, remote work world, using an alternative to Trello for those of you who may have issues with sticking with Trello for whatever reason. Okay, with that, our next tool, Augusto?
Our next tool is not a productivity thing. But it was something that was introduced to me by my kids. So during the Christmas break, my kids invited me to play a game called Among Us. And we were playing with my nephews and my niece and my brother-in-law, and we end up making a game of 10 people. And basically the game is you are trying to fix the ship, and somebody's the imposter and is killing people on the ship, and you need to discover who it is. And it's really simple. The game is really simple, runs on almost any device, but it was really a really fun family game, except for my nephew. But everybody else was really having a blast. My
Oh,
nephew
your
did
poor
not like to
nephew.
be killed, but everybody else was having a blast. I think even he was having a blast, except he did not want it to be the dead body. He wanted to be the imposter every time. But it was a really fun thing. So as we talk about productivity, part of the productivity also is take care of yourself, is rest, is entertain. All those things are part of productivity. So this may be the first game we are going to mention, not the last, but the first game we are going to mention on Anything But Idle.
Definitely against my better judgment. But with that, next up I have you, Derek. Derek, what's your choice tool of the week?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. And up until last month, it ran on Adobe Flash. It's now HTML5 coded as Goalscape. And it was actually designed by a sailing Olympian, German sailing Olympian, Marcus Bauer there. In the project management world, if you're acquainted with work breakdown structures, where you have, okay, here's my project, we'll think of it as a goal, and then you break it into components and you break it into tasks. This is a similar thing, but it's in a circle, and you can use it for a single goal, you can put it for your whole life sort of thing, and break it down further and further out in these concentric circles as you design what you're going to accomplish. And then as you accomplish them, you mark them complete. You can share them with others. You can share tasks with others and that sort of thing. And as you can see in that the graphic there, it shows the progression of completeness as well. So, the gray outer edges there you can see are almost done, partly done, not started. So if you look at it, basically your whole life sort of thing, and the goals in the different areas, as Augusto said at the beginning of the program, you can see areas that are not being addressed because you're not accomplishing your activities, your tasks, and your goals in there, and you can see other ones that as they do progress. It has a desktop version. There's also an online version. There's a app. There's smartphone apps as well. I believe both Android and iOS, so you can carry it with you as well. And so this was just something it was a number of years ago. I had discovered this and kind of played around with it, but since I retired the end of November, I've been doing a lot of, besides game playing, I've been doing a lot of catching up with these applications that I had invested in the past.
Looks good. And I guess it's a freemium, because I saw it had pricing up there. So is there?
It's tiered. Like you can get a basic online one frame, I think they call it, and then you can get the desktop for a one-off cost, and then you can get the online cost for a monthly, lower monthly cost. So there's a number of different tiers and arrangements that you can do with it.
Fantastic. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Dr. Buck, what's your choice this week?
All right, mine is one, it's not new, but it may be new, probably is new to a lot of people out there, but it's a website called WeTransfer. The problem that we all have is, we've got a lot of pictures we're trying to send to somebody, and making them email attachments just doesn't work. So how can I send lots of data across the web and do it for free? And this site will do it. You don't even have to. They invite you to create an account, but you don't even have to create an account. And you basically just drag stuff onto the screen, put your email address, put the email address of the person or people that you're sending it to, and click, and it's gone. It will let you know when it's been delivered. It will let you know when the people, what happens on the other end is they get an email from WeTransfer with a link in there. They click, it downloads. So instead of going through their email, it's uploading to WeTransfer's server. They click a link, it downloads it from WeTransfer's server. After a few days, WeTransfer deletes it from their server. Like I said, you get a link you get an email letting you know when the other person has downloaded it. You also get an email if they haven't after a few days. It'll say, the link is about to expire in 3 days or whatever, so that you can follow up. But it is just so easy and has helped me and a bunch of people I know, helped us out so many times.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Buck. And with that, we just have one announcement this week, and then we will close out the show. And so this week, just wanted to let everybody know that David C., I think that's how you pronounce your name, David. I apologize if not, or Dave C. And so if you go to davidseah.com, he has done his updates for his very popular planners where he designs these beautiful emergent task planner items, and you can print them out and so on and so forth. So they are now been updated for 2021. So those are all out there if folks are interested in doing that. I'll put a link to that in the show notes for you so that you can go ahead and download that. So with that, we've covered hopefully all of the productivity and technology news this week that was pertinent to you. And I want to just give thanks to Derek Reinhardt and Dr. Frank Buck for joining us today for the show. Dr. Buck, if folks want to keep in touch with you, how do they do that? How do they keep in touch with you and your work?
Okay, come over to my website, frankbuck.org, and that's the keys to the candy store. You can get on my email list. I'll be in your inbox every Tuesday, letting you know about new stuff on my blog, podcast, YouTube, et cetera, et cetera. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter and or Instagram, I'm at Dr. Frank Buck, Dr. Frank Buck, in other words.
Wonderful.
To connect with you.
As always, thanks for joining us here on the show, Frank.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Dr. Buck.
And Derek, how can folks keep in touch with you and your work?
Well, yes, I started a website called GTD With, something that was incubating in my mind on how flexible and actually tool agnostic that getting things done is. And so I wrote 2 small books, GTD with the Bullet Journal and GTD with Goalscape. And you can catch up with me, subscribe at that site there. And like I said, I'm just starting out retired and learning, setting up my own goals for being retired. So we can start with that.
Wonderful. Welcome, and welcome to the show, and thank you for being here, and hopefully we'll have you back again soon.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
All right, Augusto, thank you very much for joining me, as always, on Anything But Idle.
Thank you very much. It was really fun, and I'm looking forward to this one and the next one.
Wonderful. Well, folks, if for some reason we missed a story, feel free to head over to anythingbutidle.com. If you anytime you want to find the episode number, if you just go to anythingbutidle.com / and the 3-digit episode number, that'll take you over to the episode page. And there on the page, you can type comments. You can find our show notes, links to all the stories that we have talked about in the show, sometimes extras that we couldn't talk about on the show but wanted to provide to you, all of that there on the episode page. But if we did miss something, you want to share that with us that's not related to a specific episode, you can go to our contact page on anythingbutidle.com. You can also tweet or DM us at Anything But Idle on Twitter. And if you have a comment or question, feel free to find us in one of those ways. On Anything But Idle on each episode show page, as I noted, we have our show notes, which includes links to all the stories, tools of the week, and as well as text transcripts that you can read and also download as PDF from the shows. There on the website, you can also subscribe. And if you are feeling generous, feel free to go to your favorite podcast app. And if it allows you to, go ahead and leave a rating or review. Just let us know how we're doing. And that really helps us stay motivated to keep doing this and to help grow our podcast listening community. And so with that, see you all next time on Anything But Idle. Here's